Hello and welcome everyone, Slothcase here to another episode of Amphibious Analysis. And in today's episode we're going to be looking at an obscure mobile suit. And I mean really niche, yet with its obscurity, it has concept art dating back to the original anime. So let's introduce today's guest, the MSM-06 Jurick. Or is it Jurick? Or Jurick? I couldn't find a proper pronunciation, and when I tried to look for the origin or what the name means, it led me through different paths. Some was Greek, German, Polish, it led me all over the place, so if you got any clue, please tell me. Name shenanigans out the way, let's look at its appearance, and it's a sight to behold. Now, I don't know about most, but when I first saw it, I always see a gorilla. A medium head, large upper body, big ol' arms, and small lower. It's built like one, and in some artwork it's leaning forward like a gorilla, and honestly, for a long time I actually thought it moved like this. Which isn't too far-fetched since, well, have you seen Zeon's other amphibious mobile suits? Moving normally is the odd one out the bunch. But if you want to know, the Jurick most likely moves like the Gogg, waddling around. And do keep the Gogg in mind because he comes up quite a few times. But now, what's its deal? Well, for the short history lesson, the Jurick's design was finished in March of 079, and construction of the first two prototypes finished in November of that year. The Jurick is classified as a heavy-duty assault-type mobile suit. I mean, just look at the damn thing. It's equipped with some strong weapons and would have a similar role on the battlefield to that of the Gogg. Heavily armored, powerful weapons, and being an overall threat that can out-mag dump you, and we'll touch on that in a second. Now everything honky-dory, and during testing, Zeon might have saw something, because this would lead to production of more, and by the end of the 1-year war, it's noted that 5 would be produced. Now I don't know if it counts the 2 prototypes in this 5, or it's separate, and this is important to know since the 2 prototypes would face an untimely demise. One would be lost in testing. My guess is it went boom, or something went wrong while it was underwater and sank to the bottom. The other one would be captured by the Federation, or how I like to put it, the Feddies poached the Zeon gorilla. Now 5's not too many, and there's a reason for that. Zeon halted production and focused on the Gogg and the Zergok, leaving this guy in the dust. Now why did they change focus? Maybe they saw promise in the Zergok, or they lost faith in the Jurick, or maybe it's both. But let's go deeper and see if this decision was for the better or worse. So let's start with some numbers, and we don't got much info in it, so this is gonna be short. The Jurick stands at a head height of 18.7 meters. This is slightly taller than the Gogg at 18.3. And as for weight, we're looking at an empty of 84.6 tons, which again, close to the Gogg's at 82.4. As for cruise mode, it's nothing special, he just straightens out his body and maybe tucks in a little bit, nothing special like the Gogg's. But for underwater speed, he's been clocked in at 67 knots, which is roughly 77.1 miles or 124.08 kilometers. As for the Gogg, we're looking at 75 knots, which is 86.3 miles per hour or 138.8 kilometers per hour. Also, the Jurick has a mono eye in the back of his head. This is to improve visibility during cruise mode, but can also be used for its weapons. That's that for solid numbers. Like I said, not a lot of info, but we can do some estimations and give it the good old college try. For max weight, we can say that it's heavier than the Gogg, but not too heavy. It's slightly bigger, it has more weapons, and it would have a similar cooling system of storing large tanks of water. However, it does say it has an improved cooling system, but I have no extra info on that. And as for generator, same case. Its output for the time would be more than the Gogg's, but I don't believe it would be too high. Like I said, it did have a more improved cooling system, but no more info is given. So I want to say it's slightly better, but it's not going to be too high. It's going to be in between the Gogg's at 1,740 or the Zergok at 2,480. And with the numbers out the way, I've been teasing his weapons for a solid bit now, so let's head on over there. Starting with his equipment, he has the Freezy Yards. Found also on the Gogg, the underwater tools that release a gelatinous weapon that covers the mobile suit. This is used to capture underwater mines, without them detonating, which would blow your cover and maybe hurt. Overall, a very helpful tool that solves a simple problem. Onto weapons, starting with melee, we have the Iron Nails. On each forearm, we have 4 sharp claws that can be used for stabbing and slashing. These are depicted to be a good size, and they have some girth to them, making them effective weapons. And we also have to take into account that the Jurick is a big boy. He's built like a gorilla, and he's got some hefty forearms, so even without the iron nails, he could easily use these hands as blunt instruments. But in combination, you don't want to get in a smacking distance. Staying on the forearms, like the Gogg, they both house a mega particle cannon. This gives the Jurick a deadly range option, and being on the arms allows him to make a shot without turning his massive, slow body. This was a problem that the Gogg had, giving the Jurick a 1-up. And on the topic of the Gogg, let's move to the Jurick's most famous, or infamous, weapon. Upon its abdomen, like the Gogg, it has a beam weapon, but not just one, nor two, or even 4. He has 8 of them. The Jurick has 8 beam guns on its abdomen, and like a belt, they circle its waist. This gives him on a horizontal plane complete coverage. Now, there's quite a few things we gotta touch base on. First is his total weapons. Yes, he has 8, but you gotta remember the 2 on his forearms. This means the Jurick is rocking 10 beam weapons. That alone is insane. These are numbers we only see on very specific mobile suits like the Zeon or mobile armors. And honestly, let's just be real here, I feel really bad for Zeon's financial and budgeting department. Having to deal with all of Zeon's prototypes and just the goofy shit they make, I feel like the turnover rate and probably the mortality rate is very high. Another key note is the type of beam gun. This is when things get iffy, and I'll try to make it as simple as possible. The Jurick would have a similar beam weapon to that of the Gogg, which is known as a deflection type megaparticle cannon, which acts differently than others due to this NPC utilizing an eye field instead of a barrel. So what does this mean? Well, in the layman's terms, the Gogg and basically every other mobile suit besides a handful have a shooty NPC. They shoot a solid beam shot. On the other hand, the deflection type utilizes its eye field and it can focus or defocus the shot. This allows it to spread out more or be more compact. Now, this was depicted in the original anime, and it was not shown to be a solid shot like others. However, it was a spread with many mini tiny shots. This spread would give the shot a larger area of effect, which is effective for the Gogg, due to him having to face everything he wants to shoot, meaning he can cover more area per shot. And it can also be used for defensive purposes as well, making it easier to destroy projectiles or vehicles. Now, while this is really cool, it rarely gets depicted. You see, the things that have this are few in number, and they don't appear in much things. And the prominent one, the Gogg, when it appears in a manga or a video game, they just give it the regular shooty NPC. And I can understand gameplay reasons on why it has the shooty instead of the spready. That does make sense, but a part of me does want to believe that people just forgot. Like, I don't blame them. You just have one Gogg depicted as shooty and that just spreads like wildfire. But for those who are curious, I did find 2 depictions. First is the PlayStation 2 game Federation vs Zeon, where the Gogg's NPCs are actually the spread version. And also there is a figure, the Bandai Robot Spirits. The Gogg has effect parts that depict the spread. So yeah, there's your little fun fact. I feel like I said spready and shooty way too many times than I needed to. But this is a Jurick episode, so let's get back on topic. So in combination with his forearms, he has all spots covered, making him a scary mobile suit, and paired with his thick armor, and it being amphibious like the Gogg, he can just get the drop on the enemy and wreak havoc. And while it's doing said havoc, causing a ruckus, and being a little rascal, this raises a question, and what's its rate of fire? We don't get a depiction, nor know the generator, but we can do some estimations. Now, like I said, I believe it's in between the Gogg and the Gogg when it comes to gen strength. And if we look at those two, they both can fire the NPCs at the same time, with a decent rate, so we can also fire 2. But unlike the others, they only have 2 to fire, so even if they could, they can't. But this is when another mobile suit comes in. A variant of the 8 guy, we have the Gogg, which has 4 NPCs, and it can fire all of them at the same time. However, it's spawning a higher generator with 2660. Also, its trunk is part of a unique cooling system, and lets the generator be pushed even further. Now, the Jurick is said to have an upgraded, better cooling system, but he's not much bigger than the Gogg. and all I see on him are a few vents, so I don't think it's as sophisticated as the Guagus. Noah uses something different like the Zagok, and it's not as big as the Zok, so it can only fit so much things inside. So in my opinion, he can fire 3 at the same time. And if we really want to push it, maybe 4, but that seems a little too radical. And as for rate of fire, I want to say it's higher than the Goggs by a decent margin, because while development, I believe that Zeon realized that beam is his only range option, so they want to make sure he can fire it a decent amount of times in succession. And to make things confusing, we don't know if the ones on his arms are the shooty or spready kind. I highly believe they're the shooty kind, because that would make sense giving him a much more ranged option, and that is a common thing among amphibious mobile suits. And there's another question of which one costs more power. Would the Jurick be shooting the shooty one more often because it's just less straining, leaving the spready one for specific scenarios, or vice versa? No idea, and I'll leave it there because I've been saying spready and shooty way more times than I need to, and it's giving me a headache. But anywho, he's a pretty cool unit. He can be summed up as a beefed up Gogg with good ideas found on other mobile suits slapped on. We got the Gogg and gave it NPCs on its hands, like future amphibious mobile suits like the Akai and Zagok. We got the Gogg's abdomen NPC and threw him some Zok flair of having weapons on its back, giving a full circle, and paired with its mono eye on the back, it can use them with ease. It's a neat combination, and it does make sense. Getting a bunch of good ideas and throwing them together should work. Should. I do like orange, and I like mint flavor, but combining them together might not be the best idea. So while this seems nice, it might seem nice on paper. So this is a good way to segue to his faults. The Jurick, while we don't have combat data and doesn't appear in anything to judge it, we can easily notice problems, and there's a few of them. So let's tackle the biggest one first, the weapons. This guy's expensive. However, that's not saying much because a lot of things Zeon does is expensive, but this guy is 10 beam weapons expensive. And while beam weapons would become commonplace among amphibious mobile suits, gotta mention again that the Akai would be shafted with a Vulcan gun instead just to cut costs. Now, sometimes it's worth the price, but I feel like his direction was lost, and Zeon might have caught on since this might have been the reason they stopped development and focused on the Zagok instead, because while the Zagok is also expensive, it's worth it. The Zagok brings something new to the table. He fills a role as an amphibious mobile suit that Zeon didn't have, a lightweight, nimble mobile suit with a longer land deployment time. And if we look at something like the Zok for example, he has 8 NPCs, but due to his humongous generator, he can fire 4 at a time and fire them in quick succession, making him a walking gun platform. And to stay on the Zok, it just does this concept better. Better weapon placements, a stronger generator, and maybe the Jurick did help lead to the Zok, with the idea of being covered in NPCs. Now, I'm surprised I haven't mentioned this before, but I'll do it here. The Jurick, due to its NPC placements, can maybe whoopsies and blast his arms off. And this could be why the Zok doesn't have an NPC on his side. Maybe they found that problem in the Jurick and corrected it on this guy. But besides that, this is something also found on the Guagu with its nose and the Zagok with its iron nails. And yes, there are definitely safety features to prevent this. I'm just not comfortable knowing that I'm a failed program away from losing an arm. Now, as a whole, I just think the Jurick is just a niche Gogg variant. And I can't be too harsh on him for that because Zeon has made many prototypes. Not all of them are going to be amazing. Some of them are going to be stupid. And sometimes a stupid idea might be stupid, but might be stupid enough to work. But I do want to end this off on something positive. And I don't really know if this is positive or not, but let me get it all out before you judge. The Jurick does have this. It makes a better high Gogg than the high Gogg. No, it's not better than the high Gogg, but if it was a variant of a Gogg, the Jurick fits the bill. Side by side, they look related, and while I couldn't find any evidence, I do remember a rumor that the high Gogg was supposed to be a standalone original mobile suit known as the Gogg. And maybe the Jurick was supposed to be the upgraded Gogg. Maybe it was supposed to be the high Gogg. And while this would be more accurate in my opinion, I do like the high Gogg more and it would be an overall better mobile suit. But who knows, maybe like the high Gogg, the Jurick was a united maintenance program away from being the next big thing. And like the high Gogg, maybe these changes could be quite dramatic. Now, while the Jurick wasn't the most revolutionary thing out there, he didn't reinvent the wheel, wasn't the most cost efficient thing out there, I can say this, and I like him. Honestly, I like him a lot. It's the gorilla motif, but I do hope he gets a chance to shine. Let him have a go and clear his name, because hell, maybe I'm just blowing smoke, but maybe having 10 NPCs on you is a good idea. Maybe throughout the 1 year war, there's a specific battle that the Jurick fits perfectly in. Or you could just make one up, and he would get his chance to shine, and maybe you would see him be a pretty decent mobile suit. But as we wrap things up, let me end it with this, and it's by far one of the most interesting things about him. And while he seems like an MSV mobile suit that was made and never expanded on, like I said in the intro, there's concept art that originally doesn't belong to him but led to him. In these memos made by Tomino himself, they have rough drafts of amphibious mobile suits. And if we look at the Gogg, we get a really weird looking thing, like some egg monster with claws and feet. But we get something interesting if we look at the abdomen. Reminds you of something, right? We can't really make it out too much, so let's look at another more concrete sketch. Now, if we look at this abomination, we see a lot of similar vibes. If we look at the head, got that cone shape, that single mono eye in the middle around this grid area, we got that mouth and the tubing. Look at the Jurick. Yes, he has his own head unit now, but it's got that cone shape. It's missing those lines in the head, but we got a mouth with what looks like thick tubing. Kind of similar, right? Then there's the obvious, if we look at the abdomen, there's the weapon circling its stomach. That's simply just cool. It's such an interesting thing that we have sketches that date back to the original anime that show off the early designs of the Gogg that would be scrapped but then redirected towards the Jurick. And if you look at old concept art, you can see a lot of that. You can just see things that were scrapped but then lingered in other mobile suits, and that's just really cool. And there's much more info on other amphibians to go into, and this whole thing is neat, but that's for its own episode. But without further ado, thank you for watching. Hopefully you're still listening due to that tidbit being my favorite thing about this guy. I just really like concept art and early sketches. Anywho, hope you enjoyed and hope to see you next time, but till then, take care and have a good one.